Welcome back to my basement and to my comfy chair and to this little corner of the internet. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. And lots of you have reached out and told me that these little videos I'm making are help and hope to you as we're grappling through together this new weird twilighty zone kind of normal in March of 2020. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. Uh, Several of you have asked me when I'm going to tackle the big giant question that all of us are working through right now, and I know why some of you have asked me, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it is this question: what am I doing about my fear right now? Some of you know, and others probably have seen it hinted in my writings that I struggle with generalized anxiety disorder. And for me, it means that I always go to like worst case scenarios, and I feel a general sense of a threat even if there isn't one. And I'm a little jittery and maybe irritable, and I spend a lot of time on the what ifs. Uh, I Mine tends to be focused around health anxiety, not like germs or viruses or anything, mostly cancer. But that's where mine goes to. My kids would beg to differ with me about that because they think I'm anxious about everything because, of course, if they don't respond to my text in 15 minutes, I assume they're dead on the side of the road in a gutter. So they would say it's a much broader. I'm not sure if that's a mom thing, an anxiety thing, but I know it's not a good thing. So, and it is a what if thing. The funny thing is that when my anxiety is heightened, my body actually responds too in kind, and I can create almost any physical symptom based on what I'm currently afraid of. Like when I'm going for my mammogram, my breasts are killing me before I go. For like the month leading into it, I'm pretty sure that I have breast cancer because my breasts hurt. And like now this week, of course, I have a little tickle in my throat and a little bit of a cough that maybe you'll even hear in the next 20 minutes. And so I can create any symptom based on my fear. I can't even read like the side effects if I'm taking a medication because I'll have them for sure within a few days. But for the most part, I feel just kind of jittery and unable to relax my mind. And um, I just kind of loop around a lot about the worst case scenario. And currently, which is kind of funny, I have a really interesting new symptom where my third and fourth toes are going numb when I feel anxious. And I actually like that because it sort of alerts me that something's a little off and that maybe I need to take some proactive steps to calm my body down. So I also have like mild panic attacks where my heart is racing and I break out into a sweat. And that could be right now from hormones and have nothing to do with anxiety. I sometimes I can't even really figure it all out. What is what and what's going on and why it's going on. But one of the things that is really the biggest part of it is that most of the time I have physical symptoms and jittery feelings when there actually isn't a real threat going on. And as a wise counselor said to me about a decade ago, is that my body actually acts as if there's a bear when there isn't a bear. There is no bear, but my body is saying, oh my gosh, there's a bear. So I get like on heightened alert as if there's imminent danger happening. And I've been doing this for about 15 years now, where I've been managing this. So I would say that qualifies me as an expert in fear. I know Malcolm Gladwell says that 10,000 hours of practicing something usually would be enough to make you an expert. So I would be pretty sure I've had 10,000 hours of being fearful and trying to manage it as best as I can. Yeah. So that's kind of where I wanted to go and what I want to talk about it now. There's just a little bit of a difference, and I've been noticing it in the last couple of weeks. At first, when there was this threat of this virus, I was confused as to whether or not it was my anxiety and I was just going a little crazy or acting a little crazy, or whether or not it was actually legitimate fear. And as I worked through it with a counselor, and I actually observed and talked to so many of my friends, so many of you, I realized that everybody's having the same symptoms, and they're the symptoms I have when I'm like in the worst part of my anxiety. But the big difference right now is there actually is a bear. There, it isn't just the threat of a bear. There actually is a big bear, an imminent threat to a lot of parts of us, our bodies, our income, and there actually is a legitimate reason to be afraid. And that's sort of what I wanted to talk about for a couple of minutes. And the question again is, what am I doing about my fear? And I'm going to say something that I never, ever, ever thought would come out of my mouth. And I'm a little afraid to say it. I'm a little nervous, but I am going to say it. And it is this: fear is not my enemy. Fear is my friend. And it's just weird for me to even say that, so I'm going to say it again. Fear is not my enemy. Fear is my friend. However, only in this very narrow vein. And I just want to read this because I wrote it down and I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Fear is a God-given natural response to threat, a good servant to help me act prudently and wisely to protect myself. But, and here's the big but, fear can quickly morph, and for me sometimes it happens in a matter of seconds, into my very harsh master, barking out terrible orders to both my brain and my body, where I cannot hear the voice of truth or the message of peace. So that's a big but in there. But having this distinction has really been tremendously helpful for me during this time. So been watching really closely whether or not fear is acting as a good servant or it's become my master. And I do this sort of by this one simple question: am I the boss of it, or is it the boss of me? Does it have a stranglehold around my neck where it has become like this, like very like life-sucking, horrible monster and master? Or is it something that's really being helpful to me to make good and wise and prudent decisions to protect myself, like Lysol wipes and washing my hands and such? So that helps me. Am I the boss of it, or is it the boss of me? So secondly, because the symptoms of fear and anxiety are exactly the same as I'm finding out, I'm managing them and have decided to manage them the same way to keep it in its proper place as my servant. So I have 4 little things. First, I am not watching the news first thing in the morning or last thing before I go to bed. I'm not ending or starting my day with the news. And the other thing related to that is when I'm actually taking in information, I'm limiting it to what actually would be helpful in maybe me needing to change some kind of behavior. Because if my behavior doesn't change, then it's unnecessary in my life, and I can disregard it for that day. Like a silly example is I would watch like a governor's address to say, you need to stay home, because I would be changing my behavior. The curfew is different now. Please social distance. Or maybe as they start to turn around, you're allowed to leave your house. Please go to your restaurants and things like that. So that's really what I'm trying to limit myself to. Number 2, I've been doing about between 10 and 20 minutes of a Christian guided meditation that I found on YouTube. And it's this awesome Australian woman who reminds me of my cute friend Meg, who has a soothing voice and always makes me feel super calm. And just look that up on YouTube. There's all kinds of guided meditations and Christian guided meditations. And number 3, practicing breath prayers. And this is when I find my heart and my mind is beginning to race. I do these almost immediately. And Sarah Bessey, Bessey, look her up and look up the word breath prayer, and she explains the practice. And it has just been so good for me to calm my heart and my mind down. And number 4 is that I'm speaking out loud to somebody I trust exactly what I'm afraid of. So I've talked to Alan, a really good friend, and a counselor about what I'm really afraid of. When I pull back everything and I'm getting to the heart of what's really going on inside, and that may take some doing for you, and it took me a little while to get there. But just speaking it out loud seems to help it lose its power over me. But as you've noticed, I kind of have to go on this like attack it from every angle approach, because I've learned in the last 15 years as I've managed this, sometimes very successfully and other times miserably, and I'm really still in this struggle of it, that I sort of go after it from every angle. So because these things are so tightly interwoven and interconnected, so I go after my mind, my body, and my soul and my spirit, or my heart and my spirit. So mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And I find that when I kind of go in this sort of holistic approach to it, that it really does quell it and quiet it for a time, and over time it quells it quite a bit. So if I can really continue to do these practices, so that would, I hope, bring you great, great, great hope that you're not just a victim to this. You are not going to be afraid forever, and you do not have to be a victim to this. It can be your servant without it becoming your master. So lastly, and I'm going to get a little bit more emotional, I'm sure, because every time I think about this, I do get pretty emotional. Alan and I were on a walk about a week ago, and I was really, really afraid. And he took a minute and asked me what I was really afraid about. And I had been using all kinds of excuses. Oh, the kids, your parents, my parents, this or that. And he said, what is it, Esther, that you're really afraid of? And I said to him, I'm really afraid that either you will die or I will die, and we won't be together anymore. And that is really what it comes down to, that I would be left alone if he would be gone, or that he would be left alone if I would be gone. And I do not want that to happen. At every depth of my spirit and soul, I don't want that to happen. And he said something that I don't know if he'd read, or I think he made it up himself in some ways, or he made up part of it himself. And he said this to me, and I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it a couple times. He said, honey, we've come from love, we're held in love, and we will return to love. I'm going to say it again to you. We've come from love, we're held in love, and we will return to love. So we are never, ever, ever, ever separated from love. I am never, ever separated from love. I'm actually surrounded by love himself. He's in me, he's outside of me, he's above me, he's below me, he's everywhere. He's with me. I'm not ever going to be left alone. And the real, real, real me, the one that nothing can touch, the one that's going to live forever, the one that connects me to you and me to my Savior, the real me is completely safe. When he said those words to me, my heart I felt like a wave of peace like wash over my soul. And it's not easy to get there for me. I have to repeat these words often, every time. And they've actually become much of my breath prayer. So I'm going to actually say them to you again. I would love for you to just close your eyes for a second, and I'm going to repeat them, but I'm going to make them very, very personal. So here we go, and listen carefully. I've come from love, I'm held in love, and I will return to love. I've come from love, I'm held in love, and I will return to love. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget that we are in this battle together and you are not alone. And my heart is with you, and God's heart is holding you. Thank you. Until next time.